If you follow the 3-step system that I'm going to explain in this video, you will probably double your net worth in the next 365 days. And I actually think that might be a lot easier than it sounds. And when I say the system, I mean the system. Each letter stands for a change you need to make to put rocket fuel on your savings and achieve all of your financial goals. Hopefully the name of the system doesn't get confusing. And I know that the system works because I'm using all of these strategies myself to save well over 70% of my income, which is why I should be financially independent before I turn 30 years old. And if you did the same, you would probably be able to double your net worth in the next year. That's because the average person watching this video is a 30-year-old guy living in the United States of America. And that means, according to the Federal Reserve, the average viewer of my videos probably has about $18,880 in savings. And that's not very much money. That's not even enough to cover most people's living expenses for a single year. But somehow that's supposed to turn into enough money to retire off of. So that's really the reason that I wanted to create this video. Because if you want to retire early, or even retire at all, you have to increase your net worth. And the good news is this really isn't that hard. You can probably double your net worth in the next year if you really want to. And whenever you want to increase your net worth, you really just have 2 options. First, you could try to increase your income. This is great if you can do it, but it's not the approach that I'm going to talk about in this video. Earning an extra $18,880 in the next year just isn't realistic for most people. And because of taxes, you would actually have to earn a lot more than that. I actually did the math for myself, and I would have to earn almost exactly $30,000 extra per year just to save an extra $18,880. Without a lot of people just smashing the like and subscribe button, that is not going to happen in the next year. But what you can control is how much money you spend. And I actually think that the average person could reduce their expenses by $18,880 in the next year. $18,880 is just $52 per day. And as I'll show later, you could actually save even less than that and still double your net worth. But either way, saving $52 per day is totally doable for most people, and I'll even show you the data to prove it. But no matter how much money you earn or what your net worth is right now, I promise that you can use the system to save a lot more money this next year. But before you start the system, there is one thing that I recommend you do. Because the system will only work if you know how to reduce your spending. And that means you really need to know what you spend your money on. So what I recommend you do is go back into your bank statements and your credit card statements and figure out exactly how much money you spent over the last 90 days. Over a full year is even better, but 90 days will do. And don't just calculate what you spent in total. It will be even more helpful if you sort these expenses into the big categories. There's a budgeting template in the description that will make this a lot easier for you, but you can also just make your own from scratch if you want to. And the reason I want you to do this first is you're probably going to notice something. If you're like the average person, 60% of your spending is just for one of 3 things. And that's why the system is so effective. Each letter stands for an expense category that you're probably wasting money on. If all you do is reduce what you spend on these 3 expense categories, you'll probably double your net worth next year. The T in the system is transportation. Whatever you think you spend on your car per year, you're probably wrong. Cars are way more expensive than most people realize. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American family spends just under $19,000 per year on this. Now, a lot of people will make a mistake here. They'll say,
over the last 90 days, I just made a couple of insurance payments and bought gas once or twice. I'm not even spending that much money.
But then these same people will buy a new $50,000 car every 5 years, which adds another $10,000 into average annual expenses. But even if you drive a sensible car that you bought used, you're still probably wasting money. Because it turns out that the cost of buying a car is only about 1/3 of the total cost of owning a car. The average American family spends another $4,650 on gasoline $1,500 on maintenance and over $2,000 on insurance every year. And this is why almost everyone can save more money on their car. No matter what car you drive, just driving less could probably save you thousands of dollars. Or even better, just don't drive at all. I'm happily car-free 2.5 years after starting my career, and this has saved me over $20,000 already. So saving money on transportation is medium difficulty with medium reward. But this next expense category could be far more powerful. That's because the H in the system is probably your biggest expense. We're talking about housing, which accounts for over 33% of the average person's expenses. And since this makes up such a big part of most people's expenses, this is also one of the most powerful ways to save more money. For example, I looked it up, and the minimum rent for that apartment building right there is $2,532 per month. And that's just for a single bedroom, single bathroom, 700 square foot apartment. If you want a 2-bedroom apartment, you would be spending over $3,000 per month. But you obviously don't have to pay that much. Even in this area, you could still easily save an extra $5,000 to $6,000 per year just by living in an apartment that's a little less nice. And if you want to save even more money, you can live with roommates and save thousands more. This is a big reason I've been able to keep my savings rate so extremely high. So housing has the most saving potential. But saving money on housing might be difficult for you because you'll probably have to move if you want the serious savings. And that brings us to the E in the system. Because this is probably the easiest way to save more money, and it's probably the best place to start if you want to save some serious money in the next year. The E stands for eating. The average American family spends almost $14,000 on food every year. And while that's less than what the average family spends on transportation and housing, that is still a ton of money. And the best part about eating expenses is you could probably save thousands of dollars even without making massive changes to your life. In the last year, something has happened to me twice, which I found really funny. I was checking out at the grocery store, and after the cashier had rung up everything I had bought and given me the receipt, they were so surprised at how little money I was spending that they double-checked to make sure they had scanned everything. But that wasn't the issue. It's just that it's actually extremely easy to spend very little money on food. If you primarily eat rice, eggs, and beans, it is very easy to spend very little money at the grocery store. But then there's one of my friends who spends over $1,000 per month on food. And half of that is at restaurants because he goes out to eat multiple times per week. It is actually ridiculous just how much money you could save by preparing your own meals and taking 2 seconds to compare prices at the grocery store. If you want to save more money, this is as close as you can get to an easy win. And before I show you exactly how you could double your net worth using the system, I wanted to share something that I wish I was told before I started my career. Because when I started my career, I was absolutely obsessed with saving as much money as possible. And I literally remember looking up the prices of toothpaste at the 3 closest grocery stores and biking to a grocery store that was not the one I usually go to just to save less than $1 per tube. And while I still encourage people to look for all of the little ways to save money, that was probably overkill. If you just do the big things right, you probably don't need to worry about the little things. Transportation, housing, and eating probably make up around 50 to 70% of your expenses. So you probably don't need to worry about saving a few cents on toothpaste like I did. If all you do is focus on the really big things that actually matter, you'll probably be ahead of 90% of people. Because if you left all of your other expenses the same, you could probably double your net worth in the next year just by using the system. And let me show you exactly how. First up was transportation. Saving money here might be easy. If you were planning to buy a car in the next year, being smart about which car you buy could save you tens of thousands of dollars by itself. But even if you aren't buying a car anytime soon, you could still probably save thousands of dollars. That's why I'm going to challenge you to drive half as much this next year. That means half as much on gasoline, half as much maintenance and repairs, and probably a lot less on insurance too. Altogether, the average family could probably save $4,000 next year by doing this, or about $335 per month. This will really depend on your own circumstances, but that is not an unreasonable number. And you might be thinking,
Charles, there is no way I can drive half as much next year. I still have to drive to work.
but that's totally fine, because next up is housing. If you want to save some serious cash, you're probably going to have to move. Housing is just such a big expense. And since you're already going to move, you might as well be really picky about where you live and live close to work, which will help you save money on transportation. This is a big reason that I've never had to buy a car, which saves me a ridiculous amount of money. But on top of reducing your transportation expenses, moving could save you a ton of money on housing. Again, this will totally depend on your own circumstances. But looking at what the average American family spends on housing, reducing expenses by $750 a month is totally reasonable. And yes, I understand that some people spend less than $750 at all. So this one really depends on where you live. But the average American family is spending $33,000 per year on housing. So even if they saved an extra $750 a month, they would still be spending $24,000 per year, which is totally reasonable. So you'll have to adapt these numbers for your own situation. But saving hundreds of dollars per month is totally doable. And lastly, we have eating expenses. And remember that these expenses are probably the most flexible. So I'm really going to challenge you here. I want you to spend $440 less on food every month. A lot of people could do that by just not eating out. That's all it would take to cut their eating expenses in half. And if you saved $335 per month on transportation, $750 per month on housing, and about $440 per month on food, you would be saving $1,525 extra dollars per month. Do that for 12 months and you would have saved $18,300, which is still less than the $18,880 you would need to double your net worth. But that's where three really important points come into play. First is investing. Invest $1,525 per month at a 7% return, and you would actually have an extra $18,880 at the end of the year. So you actually don't need to save $52 per day. You really just need to save about $50 per day. But again, this depends on the stock market. And second, I've been assuming so far that you literally aren't saving a single penny. Unless you literally spend every single cent that you earn, you are already going to have some savings that will increase your net worth in the next year. So if you were already planning to save $500 per month, then after 1 year, you would already be $6,000 wealthier. You could double your net worth without making such massive changes. And third, I haven't even talked about increasing your income at all. But most people probably will. The majority of people who watch my videos are still early in their career. And that means you're still learning new things and gaining valuable experience. So there's a good chance that you'll earn more money too. As long as you don't let your expenses increase, you'll have even more money to save. So doubling your net worth in the next year is totally reasonable. But here's what I want you to do. Remember that the first step was to look at your expenses over the last 90 days. I want you to really look at your costs and decide how you're going to take action over the next 90 days to spend less money. And then 90 days from now, you can repeat the exact same process. If you do this 4 times over the next year, you'll probably have made serious changes to your wealth. But this will only work if you take action. So I hope I've inspired you to get started and given you a few steps you can take. And remember that there's a budgeting template in the description just waiting for you to use it. And if you need even more ideas on how to save more money, I broke down a ton of the strategies that I personally use to save the vast majority of my paycheck. And you can see them in this video right here.